When I was in Indonesia, you don't need to write this down, it's a bit of a funny story, you can if you want. But the Indonesians, more than any other country, love taking photographs of you. And with those photographs, you've got to be in good light, many times flashlight. And I also noticed that when I went to the big Buddha Chaitya Borobudur, they had a big sign there saying they banned people from taking flash photographs of Borobudur because the flashlight was degrading the stonework. And I said that to many Indonesians as well. All those lights were degrading me as well. But they never took any notice. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here. I have heard, I apologize for not being able to give you a talk this morning, but I looked at my mind and quality control told me that if I give a talk this morning, it wouldn't be not a very good talk because I was very tired. I did leave Australia on Sunday morning at 3 a.m. That was Perth time. So that was, what's that? 1:30, that's 12:30 a.m. Sri Lankan time. Been travelling all the day. And to get to Sri Lanka early this morning or just late last night, I think, forget which, but roughly about midnight last night. And travelling up here, I was quite exhausted. And it tells me an important part of even meditation practice. Please remember that willpower is helpful sometimes, but if you just use willpower to overcome things like tiredness or restlessness, it doesn't really work long time. I've mentioned this to a few people already. Whenever they say that they suffer from restlessness or from sloth and torpor, two of the big hindrances in meditation, how do you overcome that problem? That's over here. That's much better. How do you overcome sloth and torpor or restlessness? And a lot of times people feel you should put more effort in. Try harder, do something more to overcome restlessness. Hold the mind strong and stiff and still. Or with sloth and torpor, put more energy into your mindfulness. But I used to do that for so many years and find it does not work, not for me anyway, and found out there's a much better way of dealing with these hindrances. And a lot of this comes from a general principle of Buddhist practice. Just when the Buddha was a bodhisattva about to become enlightened, or many of his senior disciples, even lay disciples, whenever they had problems like sloth and torpor, or like restlessness, or any problems, sometimes they thought of it as Mara. Mara had come to visit them. And how did they overcome Mara? They never overcame Mara through effort, through force, through struggle or striving. They overcame Mara through wisdom. I know you, Mara. And then Mara had to leave, with his shoulders drooped, his head bending down. The monk, the nun knows me, the monk knows me, the monk knows me. And then he disappeared. That is how we defeat these problems. Not through your willpower, but through wisdom power. And what do I mean by that? For something like sloth and torpor, for many years I was practicing as a young monk in northeast Thailand. And in northeast Thailand, under Ajahn Chah, he was always telling us not to sleep more than 4 hours a day. And even though I was young, lots of faith, the best I could do was 4.5 hours. I just could not get it down less than 4.5 hours a day. But nevertheless, even though that was a struggle, I still felt very tired. Basically, as a young man, naturally I was not getting enough sleep. And also, the food which I ate in northeast Thailand at that time, it was not nutritious at all. It was subsistence farming. Literally, whatever crawled on the ground, that's what you would eat with sticky rice, glutinous rice. And even the soil was degraded. It was mostly sandy soil. So when the rain came down, it washed all the nutrition from the soil, and that went into the waterways underground. So it was very bad soil, food which didn't have much nutrition at all. And we only had that one meal a day. And just to make the talk interesting, some of the food which we used to eat, I will tell the story if you haven't heard it already. I used to be a vegetarian before I was a monk, but now I was told there's no way you can practice vegetarianism as a monk in northeast Thailand. They just sometimes didn't have vegetables or fruit. And one day, all we had to eat was a bowl of glutinous rice, and on top of which they put a frog. Quite a big frog, boiled. No salt, no chili, no garlic, no sauces at all. Just a boiled frog on a bowl of sticky rice for our one meal of the day. I'm not exaggerating. And this is especially for the lay people at the back over there. If ever you have children and they say, "Why do I have to go to school?" please tell them it's amazing what you learn at school, which brings benefits for you later on in your life. I paid attention when my teachers taught biology. I knew one part of a frog from another part. The monk sitting next to me didn't. He didn't pay attention to biology lessons. So when he was eating his frog, he pressed what was called the frog's bladder. That bladder still had urine in it, and that frog peed all over his rice. And that was the end of his meal that day. It's okay to laugh during talks. And the reason I tell funny stories, it does connect you to me, and it allows me to teach more Dhamma. Otherwise, you find people get bored, and then they turn off. So anyway, that was one of the reasons why it was useful to remember just to listen to what's being taught. You can learn so much, in all sorts of areas of life. But anyway, because the food was not nutritious at all, of course I did not have much energy. Not only that, in those days, there was, just like here, there's no air conditioning, no fans, and we would sit meditation out in the jungle, in the rainforest, early in the morning, usually at 3:30 a.m. I hear here you only get up at 4 o'clock, is that correct? We used to get up at 3 in the morning over in those monasteries. You were sleep deprived. The atmosphere in those forests was very humid and hot. And I was born in London. I was not used to that climate. And I was sleep deprived, malnourished. There was so many negatives there. So what happened when I would sit most mornings, I get sloth and torpor. Couldn't help it. Why? Was it my fault? Or was it cause and effect? Nature. How many of you know enough about Dhamma now to know we don't blame people? This is cause and effect. We found out why. Where does this phenomena come from? And then we have the possibility of healing it. So anyway, is there a fan on? I just said we don't have fans and I thought someone turned one on. So anyway, no? No need. I think it's just the wind, the natural fan. Yeah. So anyway, I tried many tricks which we attempted. If you haven't heard, one of these tricks was using a matchbox. You take the cover off the matchbox, still with many matches inside of it, and you put the tray with the matches on your head. The reason you do that is because if you do have sloth and torpor, that once you start nodding, the matchbox falls off. And you hear it, everybody else hears it, and it's quite clear that you are sleepy. And to my amazement, it only took me about a week or 10 days that I could sit meditation in the early morning in the hot jungle, malnourished, not enough sleep, and that matchbox never fell off. So it was amazing. I've conquered sloth and torpor. But be careful, because the brain is very sneaky. Defilements can trick you so easily. Someone took me aside and they said I was watching me while I was meditating. And they said the reason why that matchbox never fell off was not because you were sitting straight. I was still nodding, but I was now nodding this way. And that's why it never fell off. So be careful. Sometimes your mind can be very, very tricky. But the experience which stopped me from trying such tricks and which overcame the sloth and torpor, finding out why I was tired in the morning. I had to renew my visa, and to do that I had to travel to Bangkok. And in Bangkok they never had any hot jungles, they had monasteries. I had to stay in a temple. And the temple was not owned by Ajahn Chah, so we could get up any time in the morning we wanted. We'd go to bed whenever we wanted. The rooms had fly screens, so we didn't have any mosquitoes in there. So I had a really good night's sleep, 5 or 6 hours. And also, they had good food on the alms round in the city. And also, we found a room in that accommodation building which actually had aircon. And we had permission to use that. And so Westerners from cold countries, we could go in there at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, turn the aircon on before the Bindabata, the alms round. And you know what? I had no sloth and torpor at all. We tried and realized from experiment that the sloth and torpor was caused, by external causes. Nothing to do with my effort. Everything to do with malnourishment, not enough sleep, and a very hot climate I was not used to. So really know that. Even in the sutras, the Buddha said, if you want to meditate, try and find a place where there's not many people, not too much mosquitoes and other things which can disturb and irritate you, and even with a nice temperature. How many of you have been to Bodh Gaya? seen the place where the Buddha became enlightened. Many of you have. It's a beautiful park. In those days it would have been very quiet, next to a river. It was a very wonderful place to be. It wasn't deep in the forest. It didn't have lots of noise like in a city. It didn't sort of have just lots of heat. It was comfortable. That's why that sometimes they call those places where people build monasteries aramas. Like sometimes the rich people at that time used them as pleasure parks, comfortable places. And I say that because if you meditate in those sorts of places, it's much easier to get some deep meditation. Yes, it can be inspirational to meditate in a deep forest, especially if you've grown up in that type of land. But it can also be a hindrance for you. But I know in Sri Lanka there are forests, there's mountains and mountains. And some of those places are inspirational. The first time I came up to Sri Lanka, they took me up to many, many monasteries and caves around the around Mahintale area. And I remember spending one night in one of those caves. And it was almost like you couldn't sleep there because this place was used by Buddhist monks for over 2,000 years here in Sri Lanka. And that had just such an inspirational energy. Wow. So, to overcome that sloth and torpor, don't use willpower. Find out the causes those sloth and torpor arise from. And then, once you get the best possible situation for yourself, you can't make it perfect. You can try and make it a little bit better. Then the next thing to notice is sloth and torpor is a lack of energy in the body and in the mind. So what do? If you get negativity towards the sloth and torpor, if you just get negativity towards the tiredness in your body, and you overreact, that eats up energy in your body and in your mind. And the sloth and torpor lasts and lasts and lasts a great long time. Sometimes, I did try to create energy. Sometimes you succeeded. But I noticed as soon as I overcome the sloth and torpor by willpower, what came next was restlessness. I kept thinking too much. And then when I slowed down the thinking, calmed it down, then I was back in sloth and torpor. I was just like a pendulum going from one extreme to another. Sloth and torpor or restlessness. And in the end, I decided I'm going to remain with sloth and torpor. I'm going to stay there and just get to know it. When I never fought the sloth and torpor, I found that I was not wasting energy. And the experience was the sloth and torpor, as soon as you started focusing on that as your object of meditation, it got less and less and less. Whatever energy my body and mind were creating were not being wasted on a fight against something which I could not defeat. And so my mind woke up slowly, but it happened all the time. And so once it woke up, then it woke up into a beautiful place, not with restlessness, but with a clarity of mind and not too much thinking. And I've used that ever since as a way to deal with sloth and torpor. My schedule is out of my control. I do teaching a lot. I do travel a lot because I've got many disciples I take those responsibilities seriously, and it means I'm often just not an owner of my own time, which means I get tired very often. And I'm also getting old now. Or as some of my disciples, the monks in Bodhinyana Monastery where I live, said, Ajahn Brahm, you're not getting old. Ajahn Brahm, you're already old. They were honest. And so, because of the old age, your body does not have the energy it used to have when you were young. So because of that, I know that in order to overcome this sloth and torpor thing, that's the best, to stay where you are, be aware of that, with this kindfulness. You know what the kindness means when you add that to your mindfulness? That means you are not rejecting what you're being aware of. You're opening the door of your heart to this sloth and torpor, or whatever else it is you're aware of, so you can know it fully without rejecting it. You're kind to it. And by that, it meant I got to know the sloth and torpor. But it's not just knowing it, because you weren't reacting to it. The kindness healed the lack of energy. The sloth and torpor got less and less and less. And this is one of the reasons why I developed a concept just in the interview which I did just before coming in here. People were talking about, they were asking me about the concept of kindfulness, which is kindness together with mindfulness. But there's more than that. With the mindfulness, I noticed there was still people just say mindful, mindful, mindful. There's different intensities and powers of mindfulness. And I did mention, it is stretching the meaning of mindfulness a little, but it is true that even somebody who is drunk at night, they can find their way home somehow or other. They have enough mindfulness to get back to the place where they live. Now that's not mindfulness which I can recommend in any which way. But nevertheless, that's a very weak form of mindfulness. And then we have the ordinary mindfulness of most people, which is you know what you're doing, but how much of what you're doing do you really know? Can you see this deeply and thoroughly? And there's mindfulnesses which are sometimes extremely strong. You know things thoroughly. And there's some mindfulness which is I call superpower mindfulness. You can see so deeply into it. Oops, sorry. That's not the thunder again, that's me. So you don't need to write that down. So anyway, those power mindfulnesses and superpower mindfulness, when the mind really has some energy, you can notice that in meditation retreats, like this one, when you can go walking back to your cottage or wherever else you're staying. You walk slowly, you don't talk to anybody. You're not thinking out solutions to deep problems. You're aware. And what you're aware of is not disturbed by things like thoughts and restlessness. And that's when it's happened many, many times to me. I didn't know what was going on. But one of the first times this happened, when I was still a lay person, and I was doing my first meditation retreat. This was at Cambridge University, just as a student. And in that retreat, we were mostly had to stay inside. But for 1 hour every morning, we were allowed to go for a walk, for exercise. And because I knew that area extremely well, I was studying there. I went to the botanical gardens in Cambridge. It was only 5 minutes from the retreat centre. And when I went in the back door of the botanical gardens at Cambridge University, I never got further than the front gate. And the reason was because that front gate was a clump of bamboo. And that clump of bamboo looked so incredibly beautiful. I say incredibly because bamboo does not belong in the cold, windy climate around Cambridge. But it looked absolutely captivating. And I just stopped there with almost my mouth open, gazing in wonder at this beautiful clump of bamboo. And I did have enough presence of mind, I'm not talking about mindfulness, just a bit of wisdom, to know that if somebody came by and saw this young student just staring at a clump of bamboo with his mouth open, they would probably call the police and send me to the hospital. But I had presence of mind enough to notice there was a bench close by, a sitting bench, and I sat on that. And after 50 minutes of gazing at a clump of bamboo, with a lot of joy, not force, that clump of bamboo drew me into it. And I was watching it, and it was beautiful, interesting, captivating, and I had to go back to the retreat center, so I made a resolution to go back the next day. And that's what I did. For 8 days of those 9, I just sat down there. Instead of exercising my body, I just sat in awe of this beautiful clump of bamboo. I'll get to the meaning of this in a moment, because after the retreat was over, back to studies and my social life as well. Then one afternoon, I had a free afternoon, and I thought, I'm going to visit the most beautiful clump of bamboo in the whole world. So I went on my bicycle, got to the botanical gardens, and when I just saw that clump of bamboo, it was the same clump of bamboo, but something was missing from it. It looked dry, desiccated, sickly. It was the most weakened and sick clump of bamboo I'd ever seen. That's actually what it normally was like, because it doesn't belong in the climate in that area of UK. And because of that, I was shocked. I realized the only reason why I could see its beauty was because my mindfulness was extremely strong, having done lots of meditation on that retreat. When my mindfulness was strong and these 5 hindrances had been lessened, it was amazing just how beautiful it actually looked. And I could look at it for hours without ever getting bored, without ever needing to focus. It's so gorgeous, it just drew you in. And that has happened many, many times since in my meditative life. You see something and it looks more beautiful than you've ever seen before. Things like your breath. Why is the breath? Breathing in, breathing out. What's beautiful about that? How can you hold your awareness on that for very long? Doesn't that bore you? Once your mindfulness is strong, then you can watch the breath and you know something like there's no 2 of your breaths are ever the same. In all your life so far, and again I'm 72 next August, in all those 71 and a bit years, I've never ever breathed 2 identical breaths. It's not just in-breath, out-breath, in-breath, out-breath. Each one of those breaths, when you're aware mindful, is totally unique. And they're very easy to watch, they're beautiful. That's why you can keep your awareness on the breath. No problem at all. In fact, it's hard to take you away from the breath unless you go deeper into it. So this is actually where that mindfulness, when it starts to get strong, it also overcomes restlessness. Many times people say, yes, they like doing meditation, they want to watch the breath. it seems an important thing for them to do, they have problems doing it. Why? Apparently, you did play a tape of mine, I don't know if it was this morning or earlier, it has to be this morning I think, or this afternoon earlier, about anapanasati. Is that true? Was that today? Okay. You know, one of the things I say about anapanasati, first of all, remember to pronounce it correctly. It's not anapanasati. I mention that because sometimes people sit in such ridiculous postures and they think if they can endure that pain, they may be able to get somewhere. I've been a monk long enough now that I know many things. There was some monk, I remember this one monk, he decided to do anapanasati all night. So he crossed his legs and he determined he wasn't going to move until the sun came up. And he completed that. Is that praiseworthy? The following morning, when he uncrossed his legs, he could hardly walk. We had to send him to the hospital to get 2 knee reconstructions. That's a true story. That person is still a monk, I won't say where, but you know, we learn from that experience. This is not anapanasati, it's anapanasati. And you have to be wise and mindful, not use force. So anyway, that's when you have that degree of mindfulness. Of course, the restlessness vanishes, and the sloth and torpor vanishes. You've got energy to watch things, and you're actually enjoying it. That's the other sign that the mindfulness is good enough. Well, you can watch, you can do it easily, with joy. That's one of the reasons I mentioned the Anapanasati Sutta. I'm not sure if you noted the importance of this. It's one of the first things you do in Anapanasati before you even start watching the breathing, to establish mindfulness as a priority. Now I know that some people translate the idea of establishing mindfulness parimukkhang. You can translate that as in front of you. But when there isn't a self, what do you mean in front of what? Where do you exist? You know, many people in the East, when I was a young monk, they always thought that you lived here. This is your location of you, where they thought they were. We have got more intellectual in Western countries, so we always think we're up here somewhere. Very few people think they live in their nose. So why do you think that meditation in front of your nose is meditation in front of you? It's illogical and it's also wrong. Instead, parimukkhang, in front, at the front, means give it priority. To have enough mindfulness at the very beginning so that you can be able to watch your breathing easily, without any problem, without force. So you watch your breath and it comes in and goes out and it's beautiful. And it's easy to do because you do the preparations first. If you want to grow a garden in your monastery, or get someone else to dig it, to do it as a monk, you have to make sure you prepare the ground first. If the ground isn't well prepared, you're wasting a lot of effort and time. It's the same with anapanasati. To prepare your mind with enough mindfulness first of all. And if you have enough mindfulness, you can watch the breath without any problem. And even that much becomes fun to do. There's something else about anapanasati, or any meditation practice, is to know why you're doing that. What's the purpose of anapanasati? Now, I was also fortunate, even after my early life, doing meditation retreats over in Cambridge. Later on, I managed to find a great master like Ajahn Chah. And one of the things he told me, and I'm repeating here as soon as I can, because I see many, many people just keep making the same mistake. You do not meditate to attain things. You meditate to let go of things, to lose things, to let things disappear. And so any person who says they want to meditate, the least I want to do is become a stream winner before I die. You never will with that attitude. This is not another attainment like a bachelor's degree or a PhD or any other sort of certificate which you can hang up on a wall. If you do understand stream winning, and you do have a certificate, where can you pin that certificate? Do you pin it on Rupa Kanda or Vedana Kanda? Is Vedana Kanda become a stream winner? Or Sanya Kanda or Sankara Kanda or Vijnana Kanda? Which do you pin it on? What becomes sort of a stream winner? In other words, the very idea is just full of faulty understandings of the Dhamma. How did the Buddha describe a stream winner? It's things which have disappeared and gone. No more Sakaya Ditti, no more Vicikicca, no more... Sorry, I missed out Siddhabhata Paramasa. Those things have disappeared. You're a lesser person, not a greater person. It's not an achievement, it's a disappearance. So that's one of the reasons why, that with the growth of mindfulness and the disappearance of sloth and torpor and restlessness, you get much more perceptive. Your perceptions are not distorted like they used to be. And a good example of this, because a few people have asked me, even before I left Australia to come to Sri Lanka, Ajahn Brahm, can you please in your talks say more about why the practice of Buddhism in Sri Lanka seemed to be not as important as the study of Buddhism. And many people have an intellectual idea of what the Dhamma is, but they don't really practice it. Even some people saying that you don't need even to meditate, or not even jhanas. And you know that is totally wrong from the way the Buddha taught, but there's also something more important there. And to give you an example, that one of my friends, we're going to have another Buddhist conference in Singapore in late December, and this friend is also going to go there to present. And that's one of my friends from Cambridge University. He was the first Buddhist I ever met. And he was a young student at the time, and I was a young student. He was interested in Buddhism, so was I. He was interested in astrophysics, so was I. He was interested in psychic research, that's ghosts and spirits and weird stuff, so was I. He eventually became a professional theoretical physicist. I was into theoretical physics as well. And he became a close associate of Stephen Hawking, the famous theoretical physicist, now buried in St. Paul's, Westminster Abbey, I think he's buried. But even Stephen Hawking, there was a movie done about him, and Bernard was also represented in that movie. One of the actors was playing him. He was a very close associate of Stephen Hawking, and a very good Buddhist, and a very good psychic investigator. And he told me this one experiment which was done. which is connected to why just study is never enough. And this was the experiment of the levitating flower pot. This was performed in Imperial College in London. One of Bernard's friends, Professor Bernard Carr, one of his friends claimed that he had discovered the secret of levitation. And he was going to demonstrate it to all his peers. These were professors, experimenters of physics, top ones, those who have been trained in objective observation. And so this scientist had all his friends come to this meeting. And then he had so much equipment in that lab, ultraviolet cameras, infrared cameras, all sorts of stuff, so that if this worked, it could be proof forever. And so the experimenter brought in a flower pot. He held it in his hands and he put it on the bench. No strings attached or anything. You can come and check if you wish. There's no funny business going on. And then the experimenter said, I need your assistance. And he said, I need you all to start chanting to create the right atmosphere to levitate this flower pot. And the chant which they chose to chant was the Hindu chant of Om. And so this English scientist had all these old professors in this lecture theatre chanting Om, Om, Om. That he could do that was amazing. But anyway, as they were chanting Om, the flower pot rose in the air. It actually did levitate. It was amazing. It worked. And after it came down again, he told people, you don't need to chant anymore. Now, what happened? And there was a couple of these professors, well known from their experiments, said the flower pot never lifted above the desk at all. I was watching it. It was there all the time. And they showed the photos, the video recordings. It levitated. That's fake, they said. And they really could not see it levitating. And the reason was because that was impossible for them. It did actually levitate. But because that was going against their views, they blocked that out and they could not see it. What actually did happen, it did levitate, but they did install a very powerful electromagnet underneath the desk. And they had to do this chanting of Om to hide the fact that whenever you turn on a strong electric current, you can hear the humming sound of that current. And so the chanting was just to disguise that this was a huge amount of electricity suddenly being turned on, which is the reason it levitated. But the point of the experiment was to show that if it's something which cannot happen in your views, you can't even see it. That is the power of things like called vipalasas. Something which is against your view, you just can't see. You block it out. It doesn't even come to your perception. There is no such thing as just bare awareness. Unless you're an arahat, unless you've just had your 5 hindrances totally removed for that while. Otherwise, you will always twist, bend, corrupt the truth. because your views demand that. That's one of the reasons why the overcoming of the 5 hindrances are crucial to seeing things as they truly are, to be able to see wisdom. Without that, you can never trust that what you see, what you hear, what you figure out, what is logical. You cannot trust that that is true. That is one thing which I did learn as a theoretical physicist. Some of those theories which were presented were irrational, but they were true. It was bent to your wisdom, but it was real. You could experiment on it and prove it. But nevertheless, it was hard to understand. My basic view of the world of Rupakanda was not properly extended far enough. And that kind of shocked me, because I thought I was a wise young man, well educated, well informed. I had all the information, but I could not put it together in a way which could actually understand what you were actually seeing as results. It's the same with the Buddhism. Often I tell people that, do you know the Four Noble Truths? Everyone in this room? I'd expect you know the Four Noble Truths. If you knew the Four Noble Truths properly, you can put your hand up and say you're Arahat. That's one of the definitions. We think we know, but we don't. We miss some things out. That's one of the reasons why you cannot put your hand up and say you're an Aryan. There's things which you've blocked out. That's one of the reasons why your mindfulness needs to be improved. I don't mean by being mindful every second, no, now I'm sitting on this, whatever it is, this is underneath me. There's a glass of water to my right. That's more than that. It's when you can see a glass of water and you can see just how incredibly beautiful it is. I've given this, I'll go into deeper teachings later on, but right now, right now, what is this? I gave this little exercise when I gave a keynote address at the World Computer Conference in South Korea a few years ago. I was wondering, what is a Buddhist monk doing at a World Computer Conference? Anyone who knows me says, my computer skills are right down there. They're terrible. But I gave the keynote address. Why? For examples like this, what is this? Many times people would say it's a glass of water, and that's as far as they would look. They think they had the right answer, they would not look further. But you look deeper. What actually is this? Is it really a glass? I can see some of the reflections now from the lights. I can see the reflection of me. I can see, the view in front of me being distorted. But I can use this for so many different means. You may have heard me use this as a visual aid for meditation. Meditation is not concentration, it's stillness. The water represents my mind. The glass is my body. How do I keep this water perfectly still? Is it still yet? No, it's moving. You know why? I wasn't being mindful of it, and now I'll be mindful of it. Has it stopped moving yet? No, it's still wobbling. You know why? I'm not concentrating, am I? I will now be mindful and I will concentrate. You saw me screwing up my face, and sometimes when I've been teaching meditation, I kept my eyes open and looked at the people in front of me, how they were meditating. Screwing their face up. They're not going to get anywhere like that. But nevertheless, I'm concentrating. You know, one of the things I've noticed, if you're mindful and concentrate, trying to keep a glass of water perfectly still, actually the more you concentrate, the more the water moves. I hope you've seen me do this before. For those who haven't, how I keep this water perfectly still, easily. You put it down. You let it go. You renounce. When you're not holding it, it's not yours to hold. Not me, not mine, not a self. Have a look at that water. There's no way in the world I could hold it that still. When you let it go, it becomes still all by itself. You need the mindfulness to do that, and the wisdom. Then your mind can be so still so easily. For those of you who have been meditating, you still have restlessness. You're still trying to do something. Still trying to get somewhere. Still trying to make something happen. And there comes a day, I hope, you'll be watching your mind, you just give up. Okay, mind, you want to wander around? Fine by me. One of those stories I told a few days ago. Actually, I told this even in the airport in Colombo, just when I first arrived. It's very hard being Ajahn Brahm. Even when you go in the toilet, people ask you questions on meditation. Honestly, they do. This was in the airport. So, can I ask a question about meditation? He said, yeah, sure. I'm supposed to be just taking a rest. Anyway, nevertheless, they said just, how do they actually meditate? They kept on thinking too much, doing too much. Because they were female, I told them the story of the mother and their son. This was a real story told to me. This mother, she was a Buddhist, good meditator, and her son was at home from school. And one day he got a bit cranky and had an argument with his mum. And he said to his mum, "Mummy, I don't love you anymore, I'm leaving home." He was only about 6, leaving home for the first time in his life. Now, if you were a mother in Sri Lanka, what would you do? This is what this Australian mother did. She said, "Okay, son, I'll help you pack." So she went into the son's bedroom with him, got a nice little suitcase, which he used for his holidays, and helped him pack all of his important possessions, his Spider-Man costume, and his lucky whatever it was, all sort of rubbish stuff, but that's what he wanted. He was leaving, that's what goes into his suitcase. And before he'd left, his mother also told him, just wait for a moment, because life is a very long journey. I'll make you some sandwiches. So she made her 6-year-old son his favourite sandwiches, put them in a brown paper bag, and then she waved her son off at the front door of the house. "Bye-bye, son, have a wonderful life. Don't forget to keep in contact every now and again." As the son walked off for the first time, 6-year-old. And the son went out, the little path to the front gate, opened the gate, turned left and went down the road for about 50 meters. And by that time, the son was terribly homesick. It's only 6 years of age. Turned around, went back to the front gate, opened the front gate, walked to the open door, and mother was still there, waiting for him. "Welcome home, son." That's how she dealt with a son who wanted to leave home. Why do I tell you that story? How do you deal with a mind which wants to leave your field of awareness? "I can't stand you, monk. I can't stand you, nun. I'm leaving." What should you do? Metaphorically, help pack its bags give it its favourite sandwiches. Bye-bye mind, have a wonderful life. That actually works. The reason it works is because you are being kind to your mind. The mind wants to go, fine. Just let me know when you come back. Your mind, this is a metaphor, then your mind never wants to leave you. Who would want to leave a meditator who's actually kind to its mind? Instead of always telling it what to do, don't you go wandering off anymore. You're going to watch the breath, okay? Watch the breath. And if you treat your mind like that with no kindness, your mind will rebel. It will be uncontrollable. And to emphasize that message, another story which I think here in Sri Lanka you will understand. In the northeast of Thailand, every farmer had a couple of water buffalo. They had worked really hard, during the planting season and also the reaping season. And those water buffalo was incredibly strong. But those water buffalo were always afraid going past forests. We reckon they were afraid of tigers. Because whenever they saw a monk, especially a forest monk in his dark brown robes, if they saw any of you in the front over here, their eyesight was not that good, and they feel something brown, something moving in a forest, that must be a tiger. And they would get scared and spook. So this man was leading his water buffalo out to the fields to graze. I think the water buffalo must have seen a monk in the forest and got so scared. When water buffalo get scared, they lift up their head, and that's a sign they're going to charge off. And this man, the farmer, the owner of the water buffalo, tried to stop it by holding onto the string around the water buffalo's neck. And the water buffalo ran off, taking the top of the man's finger with it. Pulled it off. Which is stronger, a water buffalo or a Thai farmer? The water buffalo, obviously. That man should have let the string go. Let it go. But he didn't, and it pulled off his finger. And he came into this monastery. I saw him there with half a finger, blood coming down. It looked pretty gross. We took him I think it was the adrenaline which ran through his system once he saw the injury. He wasn't screaming, but we took him to the hospital and got him fixed up. But we thanked him for that story. Which is stronger, you or your mind? Your willpower or your mind? If your mind wants to run off, who's going to win? So, your mind wants to run off. Don't get up to too much mischief, mind. Because what happens with the water buffalo, they only run about 100 meters down the road and then they stop. Then you just walk after them. You can then take the string and take them to where they're supposed to go. You don't have to control them. Same with your mind. Understand your mind. Don't try and control it. Learn how your mind works. And then you find your mind and you can be really peaceful. These are just metaphors, but they're powerful. You find if you and your mind have a good relationship, your mind never wants to run off, hardly ever. And that way, your mindfulness can be strong and will never disappoint you. And that's where you start to be able to establish mindfulness as a priority. And it means your meditation gets so easy. What is meditation anyway? It's not something you have to do like going to the dentist's. It may hurt. It's one of the most beautiful, wonderful, joyful things you can ever do. And I say this, honestly, the Buddha says sometimes it's like the mind leaps towards the meditations. It's like you see it coming. Yes. And just naturally you just go right into there because it's a gorgeous, peaceful, beautiful place to stay. It's not something you have to do. Something you can't wait until it actually happens. Yes. Let's go for it. You leap onto it because it's so attractive. You see the most beautiful bamboo in the world. It's not really supposed to be beautiful, but my goodness it is. So this is actually where you learn how establishing mindfulness is an important part of even things like anapanasati. To actually establish that mindfulness first. Then all these meditations get so easy. Is that good enough for now? It's 4 o'clock? 5 o'clock? No, sorry, yeah. Okay, now, what happens now? Was I speaking too quickly for you, or was that good enough? Okay, very good. One of the hardest things is to translate it, but I have full trust in you. So thank you. You don't have to make it perfect, as long as it's good enough. Thank you, everybody. What do you do after a meditation, after a talk? You do sadhu, sadhu, sadhu? Okay. Now there is a way which I do the 3 sadhus. I do this in the West because sometimes you'll sit here on a retreat and you don't have enough energy. I've seen people do sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. To me that's never good enough. You give it really full energy. Many of you have known this, a few of you have ordained, so remember, Venerable full sadhu, okay? 1, 2, 3, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That's not good enough. You weren't participating. Come on. 1, 2, 3, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That gives you a bit of joy and happiness, energizes you. That's why we do this. It's not just for fun. There's a point behind it. Okay. So anyway, I wish you happy translation.